So my two-part question for the panelists. First of all, are we really at an inflection point with some of these developments? And if so, what's the technology that's enabling these markets to take off? Because we've been talking about lots of these things now for close to a decade. The second question, maybe the second part of the question, I did prepare a paper earlier this year on disruptive innovation. It's available on our website if you're interested. But there are several things, and I want to highlight two and use that in this question to the panelists. There are three things that drive the adoption of disruptive technologies. One is a need that is so significant, so pressing that consumers are clamoring for it. So we've got a scale, and in general, you want to find miserable customers, because those guys are already adopting. But the other is the value proposition, and beyond cool and interesting, it's so compelling, you see it, you have to have it. So the question that I'd like each of the panelists to speak to very briefly, in a minute or less, is first of all, what's the technology that's created the inflection point? Why are these markets taking off now, not 5 years from now? And then if you could give us an example of one of these technologies that combines a situation in which customers, consumers, individuals, businesses that are adopting these are miserable with the status quo, and the value proposition is so compelling they have to have it, okay? So, technologies and an example that fits those two criteria. Who wants to go first?
Hey, it's easier to go first, so I'll go first.
Sorry.
So the technologies, I'm going to say there's not one technology. It's a combination of technologies. And I think it started with the smartphone revolution. When the smartphone came about, that's when you started having open operating systems. You started having applications, developers getting interested. So you got a wealth of applications now. You had sensors start to be used, so the price of sensors goes down, and those sensors are very important for this connected life that we're talking about. And you had networks that had to keep up with the demands of the smartphone, so you get 3G and you get 4G LTE. All of this is working together to provide, I think, the right time and the momentum for this kind of endeavor.
Okay, why don't we take the technology question first? Each of you chime in. Anything you'd add to that, John?
Yes, I agree with your assessment. I would like to add, it was the inflection of processing and chipset and diameter of the die and shrinking of the processing technology and making better efficient batteries that delivered a platform you hold in your hand, and then the combination of radio chipsets and the advances in chip technologies that gave you Wi-Fi and Bluetooth and licensed radio all in a box. And then as you watched it go from one band, and then it went to 2 and 3 GSM bands, and then it went to 5. Now there's one phone with 8, or I forgot how many. It's got all the GSM bands in the world. It's in this new phone that I just saw the other day. And it also has your Wi-Fi. And it has multi-mode, so it's 2.5 gig, 5 gig, soon millimeter wave, and near field connection in car. So it's an embracing technology.
Thank you, John.
So I guess the one that I really feel compelled to mention is analytics, and then cloud as an enabler for analytics. So the devices are fascinating. The mobile connectivity is huge in terms of taking it with you and having it actually be part of your life. But it all doesn't do anything unless you're able to handle these very, very large amounts of data. So we've talked about 50 billion devices by 2020 in Cameron's talk. Each one of these providing everything from little bits of telemetry to massive amounts of continuous video. How can you take that all in? How can you process all that? And how can you use it to actually make decisions? That's really in the analytics world. And certainly you want to be empowered to make the decisions you as a consumer or you as an enterprise or you as a city leader need to make. But there are many decisions and processes that you can automate. And there are many ways that you can be assisted and advised if analytics can happen in the right timely format. So some analytics are going to look over a long period of time. Other analytics are going to be streaming analytics that are just picking up the pieces of data that are relevant at that moment and picking them up. The way you handle that kind of scale is with the cloud, because now you have dynamic sizing of the IT infrastructure behind the analytics, and you can also put dynamic sizing of the bandwidth that's needed to support that. And so I think that when you combine the ability to get data, to continuously get data through the mobility networks, with the ability to process it and make sense of it, you end up with a real complete solution.
Great. Thanks, Angela. Sam, you want to add anything to that?
I think we've kind of hit on pretty much most of the major pieces, and I think from my perspective, you have periods of critical mass, and then critical mass is recognized, and then when everything sort of comes together. Prior to that, you've got a bunch of pieces just floating around out there. So several things associated with those bunch of pieces is again low power processors, high-speed networks, reduced radios, so very, very small radios. A lot of our devices have multiple radios built into them. And then the ability to really hold it in your hand, so size, weight, battery, reduced power, and then the network capabilities all come together. You have critical mass, and then all of a sudden you've got the ability that you haven't had before in a form factor that people want, and then things that people want to use. If you think about it, how many people, think about 10 years ago, how many people knew they wanted or needed a smartphone? Not very many. So we created a market for it, and it occurred because the critical mass was there to enable it to actually happen.
Great. All right. I think what I'll do is open it up to the audience.
Lay in all of that.
So to paraphrase, what's going to unlock this market so that we'll see it literally explode? Okay?
So where I think is, and I mentioned it briefly in my talk, is the democratization of development. Taking development from a very, very specialized discipline that requires a huge amount of training and is sort of constantly refreshing into something where relatively novice people who might be business experts or consumers themselves can develop their own applications and figure out what it is they want to achieve. We've got something very interesting in IBM, and it's out there in the public domain now, called Bluemix. And Bluemix is based on a standard called Cloud Foundry. Cloud Foundry will let you take bits and pieces of software as a service applications that you can pick up in the cloud world and take just portions of them, not buy the whole application or subscribe to the whole application. Take a piece of this and a piece of this and a piece of this and put it together in a very efficient way. So I think you're going to start to see the required skill level for many types of application development dropping. You're going to start to see the people who are more on the creative end or the process management end or the financial end of institutions be empowered to do things on their own instead of sitting with their developer and their systems engineer to describe what they want to achieve, actually go ahead and try it out. And that's going to pull in all these different data sources that are coming out of this Internet of Things. So I think that'll change a lot just in the next 3 to 5 years.
So I want to get a few more questions in, so quick answers on top of that, and then we'll get another question in.
To the point of making the expanded consumer conscious of the tools, I think that the next generation devices, smart devices that are evolving with improved processing of batteries, they're going to start talking to each other, machine to machine, in a self-organizing network mode. So not only will the analytics be critical, you're going to have huge data mining operations. The data mining tasks that face us going forward are almost as big as Mount Everest. And I think self-organizing networks are going to connect the car to the phone, to the light lamp, to your refrigerator, to your wrist device, etc. And that's the next major innovation, as I see it, that's going to take off.
And let me touch on one thing. I was wondering how many questions we would have before somebody said the inevitable word security. Because every single panel I'm on, that is one of the questions. It was question number one from the audience, so thank you, Hamish. I think this might be the time when maybe the trusted execution environment, trust zones, things like that, start coming of age to be used in more than just, let's say, banking applications and things like that. I think we're at a point where there have been enough breaches in security that have gotten a lot of attention. There's the infamous refrigerator that spammed everybody. I don't think that was Samsung. And I think there's enough people that are concerned about security that finally, it's not something that you make a lot of money on when you're building a product. You don't think, I'm going to make a lot of money because people are going to pay for security. But it's just going to have to be built in and for people to really start using these things in the kind of environment that we're talking about.
Yeah, I would agree on the security viewpoint. Part of the challenge with security, people are not willing to pay for it until some event happens. And unfortunately, we're an incredibly event-driven society. So you see things, and I feel sorry for the people at Target. I know quite a few people who work there. They were the tipping point because it was so large. But there have been Heartland and a whole host of others have been hit by this. So you have to build it in, and this is, I think, one of the mantras that going back, my start in security was in '89 or '90, and we really were trying to get things built in, and we had a huge push with people like Microsoft and Apple and others to just, start with the design of build security in. And we came up with a model that's taken off today, which is you have a hardware and a software combination. So if you think about it today, trust zone architecture, you've got an environment that you can run trusted applications and trusted services in, and then you start building on top of that. You really start to build that whole model. You now need to be able to do mutual authentication across an inordinate number of devices. To me, that's going to be the harder piece of this equation. We know how to build the core infrastructure. Now we need to build those authentication components, and that's not an easy thing. Spent a bunch of time trying to do that within a fairly large financial institution. And for those of you who do online banking with them, you're still using a bunch of, if you're using some of the security features, you're still using a lot of the stuff that we built into it. But it has to really be in the core. It has to be designed in. It can't be bolted on anymore. And it really has to start off with that sound foundation. In the late 90s, several of us sat down with a lot of what at that point in time were the card associations and the AT&T vendors and said, look guys, you've got to build this stuff into the card swipe. So, it gets encrypted at the time you swipe the card. And if it's built into the firmware, it's much harder to go after than if you have to do that inside a general purpose multiprocessing environment. So now we're starting to see that kind of stuff take off, and so I think those are going to be really key things that we'll need to do from a security perspective.
So to paraphrase, how do we ensure that individuals have control over their data, and that their data, which is being created at an exponential rate, isn't used in ways that are to their disadvantage, if you will? So quick answer to that one, that's tough.
Part of the challenge is technology is changing very, very fast and very, very rapidly. There are a lot of reasons for collecting anonymous data. So for example, I, as a handset manufacturer, want to understand issues, concerns, usage rates so I can improve the overall design of the product. I really don't care who's using it. I'd love to understand the demographics and things along those lines. The real challenge comes down to a public policy issue and what you're willing to give up. And today, most people, and this goes back, and this is a few years ago, I would hand you a candy bar and you'd give me your password. Today, I hand you a really cool application, and I'm not going to mention any here, but a really cool application that collects everything about you, hauls all that data back, and you have no idea what they're doing with it. And their privacy policy even states that. People are not paying attention. So it becomes a function of having the ability to instantiate and to identify a privacy policy that people can understand, the normal person can understand. They don't have to have a master's in law or something along those lines. So the real challenge is being able to provide a very easy to use, very understandable way to tell people what's going to happen with that data. I mean, think about it. Beacons is a great technology, but the challenge with beacons is now everybody knows you're there. One of the things we've talked about is that when I walk into a room, I can identify all of my friends. Well, how do you allow people to do that if they want to, and be able to make sure that they have the capabilities and the understanding to deal with the upside as well as the downside of doing that? So it's a real challenge, and I think there's a lot of work being done. I think there are a lot of ways of doing this. I think this is one of those that we're going to have. We continue to work as as a community to really try and understand, but it's a very difficult thing to express, and people are going to do things that they shouldn't. You can't help them. You can't stop them from doing it. But if you provide them with enough information and you provide it in the right format, then it will help them make those decisions.
It's a great question, great answer. Anything the rest of you would like to add on that?
What he said.
Yeah.
It's sort of like that train has left the station, we've got to deal with it.
You got to deal with the Internet of Things. It's not just your data, but it's Internet of Things.
I'll mention that Michael Becker, who formerly was head of Mobile Marketing Association in North America, for some reason is pursuing his doctorate. I advised him against it, but anyway, I'm also advising him on his dissertation, which is all about the personal data store. And it's a fascinating, complex topic about which most of us, myself included, know very little given the opportunities and potential that's emerging. But it's a critical topic, so thanks for raising it. We have time for one last question. Oh, yes. Who pays and what's the business model behind the smart cities?
Yeah, so it's an excellent question, and I think that there are both top-down and bottom-up approaches to that. So the way we've chosen to package our stuff, and there's going to be a lot of approaches in the market, which is a beautiful thing. The way we've chosen to approach it is to say, we can go to a city like Rio de Janeiro or Dallas, Texas, and we can work with, the mayor and the city operations lead, and we can tell them that we can really help you build a comprehensive smart city that includes, water, transportation, health, social welfare, on and on. And we can show them the big picture and the interrelationship between these separate verticals in the city. And we can look for an investment at that top layer. But the realistic fact is that most of our governments don't lend themselves to that type of a buying model. It would be a multi-year sort of allocation process that you'd have to go through and a very slow procurement. And in the meantime, the technology is changing and data is building up and you're sort of missing out on these opportunities. So we also take a bottoms-up approach where we're able to just begin with one vertical in a city. If transportation is their sore point, we're able to begin with 2-3 forms of transportation. Is it the roads? Is it the buses? Is it the trains? Can we optimize some of this, and can we put in place a longer-term plan to build out the other forms of transportation, all the way down to walking, right? That are realistic, especially in a big urban setting. And can we then share that data, maybe 2 years later, the data that was built up for the transportation system, which includes geography, topography, population movements, can that be extended to help make the water system or the power system act more efficiently? And so we try to build business cases on more of an industry vertical basis, but then expand them. And in the same way, also, I just want to make one more point, which is no city sort of is a hard boundary. When you're here in Atlanta, you might drive a little bit further and you might find yourself in Buckhead, but that's all part of your transportation experience. That's all part of your daily life as an Atlanta Metro resident. So we want to think about how to help cities, all sorts of government entities, public and private entities, share the right information that actually crosses borders, whether it's between cities, states, or whatever. That's another challenge, is you only get the value out of something like transportation optimization when you look at it on a more regional basis. That's how people really live. So in both of those things, you have to think about the separate verticals and then the benefit of bringing that together, and you have to think about a regional perspective.
Thank you, Angela. Just to wrap up, I'm going to ask John, Cameron, and Sam to answer my initial question, and that is there a killer app that you can identify that solves pressing, extraordinary problem for consumers, and at the same time is so compelling that not only those of us in the audience, but the normals, if you will, are going to rush out and embrace this tomorrow? Is there a killer app, and if so, what would you nominate?
If I had a killer app, I wouldn't tell everybody. I'd go make a mint on it. I don't know that there's a killer app. It's everybody's been in the hunt for a killer app for a long time. I think there are things that will make people's lives better. There are different segments of the population that things appeal to them. And one that I mentioned before that I think is really very interesting is every day there are new companies, often they're small startup companies, that are thinking of new things to do with data or building new sensors that can detect things. And so when I see a report out of Israel that they have created some capability to, from a sensor, be able to detect what is in your food, what content is your food, then you match that up with, if you know the content, you know how many calories are in it, you know what you're eating, you know, and again, you make your life that much better. You make sure that if you have allergies, you're not eating something that you don't. And this is just an example. There's not one killer app. It's all of these things that are going to add up together to make people's lives better, and then that's what's going to be compelling for them.
Great answer. John, Sam?
I have to agree with you again. And only thing I would add is that I think as the operating systems morph, you know, the Android systems, the iOS systems, like all the different operating systems, there's going to have to be some kind of user universal interface convergence where, yes, I happen to bike and run, maybe you happen to ski, we have different physical outlets, and somehow the app, when you get this new device, the intelligent device of the future, it knows your past histories, maybe, because that huge data mining operation, but it begins to customize to your eating and your physical types of activities and your entertainment types of activities, and it learns because you accept this. And so I don't think it's a killer app as much as a killer interface.
Yeah, I would agree the interface pieces, I think we're working through part of those. Some of the challenges, you know, just really have to do with, you know, how do you really incent innovation? And I think, you know, innovation comes in throwing things out there and then figuring out what really works and what doesn't. And I also think, you know, as far as a killer app goes, there's not going to be a killer app for everybody. There's going to be a killer app for various types of individuals and various types of organizations. And I think that's where you're going to start to see a lot of that take off. And so it's going to be a function of, you know, if you think about the medical community, the ability for me to provide telemetry to my doctor without me having to to pick up a, you know, $5,000 device and haul it around because it's cheap and I can use, you know, stuff that I've already got, or, you know, in the banking side of the world, being able to do mobile payments, something that, you know, has been around, the thought's been around forever. You know, think about the smart cards and stuff like that.